Great. Well, we're live here at Canberra Modern, and we'll be joined in just a little while with our in conversation guest this afternoon, Ian Wong of the Ian Wong collection. So, if you've just joined us, we're going to have a conversation with Ian Wong about industrial design this afternoon. And we'll be taking questions, so keep those firing through the comments, and we'll have a chance to address those later. And we've just been joined by Ian, so we're waiting for Ian to join us down below. Hi, Ian.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to Canberra Modern this
Thank you.
afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you've just tuned in, we're live here at Canberra Modern with Ian Wong of the Ian Wong collection and many other fantastic things, of course. My name's Edwina, and I'm one part of Canberra Modern, and
I'm Rachel Jackson. Hello. And also online today is Amy Jarvis. She couldn't be with us today, but we know she's in the audience. Hi, Amy.
And we are the founders and co-creative directors of Canberra Modern. And this week here on Canberra Modern, we've been exploring Canberra's industrial design heritage. And I must say, it's been a really fantastic journey. It's taken us to places that we knew. It's unearthed names that we knew, but really with Ian's guidance, we've discovered some names that we didn't know, and that's the joy of being able to speak to Ian directly this afternoon. He's going to take us a little bit on that journey and tell us some things that we didn't already know. So as I said earlier, we're going to chat for about 30 minutes, and we'd love for you all to join in if you can. If you have a question for Canberra Modern or for Ian, please type it away in the comments, and we'll be taking notes of those, and we'll have a chance to weave those into the conversation if we're not already addressing your question, or take those right at the very end. So let me introduce Ian. Ian Wong is a lecturer, researcher, curator, collector, industrial designer, and part of the design department at Monash University. And he is the director of the Ian Wong collection, and we're going to find out a bit more about that later on. So, Ian, it's been fantastic to have you on this journey this week as we've looked into Canberra's industrial design heritage, albeit just a little bit that's been known to us. And we've been profiling quite a lot of names that will be familiar to our Canberra Modern audience and to us as well. And so those names are Fred Ward, Derek Wrigley, Robert Foster and Fink Design, and of course Stuart Devlin, who has a fantastic connection to Canberra and was a very prolific industrial designer. Before we talk about some other Canberra industrial designers, you actually met Stuart, didn't you? Can you tell us how that came about and what it was like to meet someone of his calibre?
Thanks, Edwina. Yeah, it was an extraordinary opportunity for me to meet Stuart, and it came out of my very early research. I was at RMIT at the time and doing my work on distinguished alumni from RMIT and trying to track some of the products which have endured. And of course, our coins in our pockets are something which has truly endured. So on a trip to London as part of my research with Monash University, I contacted Stuart and went to his home. And both Stuart and Carol were delightful. They fed me a beautiful salmon lunch in their home, which is in the book, if you get a chance to look at the exquisite book on which Carol did on Stuart. But it really opened my eyes to the extent of this, distinguished alumnus, and inspired me in my early days of my career to really try to get to the careers of the people rather than from things that I'd read, but to actually talk to people in person. And the work I'm doing at the moment with my exhibition in Tasmania is also helping me to do that. So I recorded a little bit with Stuart. I then visited him on a second occasion, and it was remarkable to see his use of computers. Like, we think of Stuart as someone who was beautiful, did beautiful drawings and had extraordinary skills as a silversmith. But he was very much up to the latest technology in the latter part of his career, and was still designing for coins for London, etc., at the latter stages of his career. So it was a great opportunity.
So, Ian, tell us, what is industrial design in your view?
Look, I think it's a very straightforward thing from an industrial designer's point of view, but there is a confusion associated with the name. But essentially, if we think of everyday objects that we have in our homes, if we go back, say, 100 years ago, the pair of shoes that you would have worn would have been made by a craftsperson in your village. The animals that provided the hide for the shoes were probably animals that were in your community. Industrial designers have been part of the industrialisation that happened and the Industrial Revolution that happened, and they became the people who would, on your behalf, design the objects which you could then choose through the mass production process. So the shoes that I'm wearing today are designed by someone in another part of the world, and I'm able to buy them online. It's a very, very different regime from where things were. And the industrial design profession, in particular in Australia, grew just post-war. And Fred Ward, who we know is well regarded from his work in Canberra, was certainly one of the pioneers. And the wonderful book by Derek on Fred profiles that sort of beginning of design in Australia. And another thing I wanted to mention today, which I thought was relevant, was the Industrial Design Council, which Fred was very much instrumental in achieving and seeing established, is now Good Design Australia. And there's a really lovely connection to Canberra with Brandon Geen, who runs Good Design Australia, receiving his PhD from Canberra University. And the supervisor was Olivia Bonolo, who has had a very distinguished career in RMIT, Monash, and now at Canberra. So there's very, very good connections through back to Canberra. And I very much enjoy the research where I discover these new things.
Yes, and we're looking forward to you sharing that. Was there something in particular that drew you personally to study industrial design?
I did have an opportunity as a young person, and I had a very good careers teacher who encouraged me to leave the country and go to the city for work experience. My first work experience was as a signwriter in a country town, and it wasn't me at all, climbing up on top of hot roofs and smelling paint thinners and all that stuff. Just really wasn't me at all. I got a work experience at an advertising agency in South Melbourne in Victoria. And then I was told to go to the open days. And when I saw the sorts of drawings, like you see Philip's drawing here of a Monaro, when you see those drawings as a young person who can draw, I could draw, I was good at maths and science, it just grabs you, and it's like people who are artists or people in film, they want to be on the stage, they want to have the spotlight on them, the grease paint and all that. For me, it just was so alluring, and I loved that. I wanted to produce those sorts of drawings and those sorts of capabilities. And then you learn that it's actually not about that at all. It's actually about the people that use objects and your particular skill and design process that you learn. Design as a process is not really very well understood by people. It's the understanding of that process. And some of the things we're going through with COVID today are where designers are using a process to assist in this time of disruption and apply that type of thinking, design thinking, to these new opportunities. Traditionally an object, but now services and other things.
It's like problem solving.
Absolutely, exactly. And if we take it all the way back to my first example, the person who was trying to make a pair of shoes for someone with an odd sized foot, when it was still a craft, was problem solving. This person's, and working with the client, understanding their needs, saying, okay, well, you work on the farm, you need more weatherproof boots, like the Bluntstone that we're featuring in Iconic. So it's that capacity to understand the need and to be able to fulfill the need that's very, very important. And Robert's jug is absolutely critical like that. Like, people think of it, well, but people look at it as an art object. They say it's extraordinary and his capacity as an artist was extraordinary. But it is so good at pouring water.
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
it is actually exceptional at that fundamental thing.
Yeah.
It's not just
And
a
then
pretty
you can
object.
also wear it
Yes.
around you. So
Yeah.
we love that industrial design is part of our everyday life, and I think you've also said it brings you joy, and it is about having beautiful things, beautiful practical things in your life, which I know Stuart Devlin in particular was all about sort of beauty and joy and light. So we know about the coins. What are some of the things that we don't necessarily know that he did?
Okay. Probably the most obvious thing that people may not realise, if you have served the community so well that you get an Order of Australia, then the medal you will receive was done by Stuart. And there's a really lovely contemporary issue with that work that Stuart did. I think if some of you have picked up on the controversy over the new Australian Made logo, I actually see origins in Stuart's work on the blossom that is the foundation for the Order of Australia medal.
Yeah.
So it's a very controversial thing, and I've raised it because of the contemporary nature of it. And the original Australia Made logo is in our exhibition in Tassie. But Stuart was also extraordinary in his work in England. He had a huge operation. People don't really realise how famous he is in the rest of the world. People think of Mark Newsom and other iconic Australian designers of having extraordinary international careers, but Stuart really did have an absolutely extraordinary career. For those of you who have not seen the tome, there is an absolutely extraordinary book that Carol put together.
Wow.
And one of the ones I wanted to share with you is this award, which Fred Ward was the first recipient of.
Oh, fantastic.
It was named after the first head of or one of the CEOs of VHP. It's the Essington Lewis Award. And I'm not sure where it is, but I would really, really love to track down whether the family have it or whether it's in some other archive. And I've posted this week also, there was a Harry Siebel Award that he did, but the cricket one I thought was particularly Canberra. Even the recent Prime Minister had that trophy, and we see Ricky Ponting on my I Spy ID site. So it's a very distinguished career. Thousands of pieces. He did work for Lady Di, he did work for the Queen. Very, very distinguished silversmith. And a very distinguished career as well. He did furniture and all sorts of things, and someone who and it's so humble. He came from Geelong. He even helped the other people in the competition when the competition for the coins. He actually helped the other participants elevate their work to a level where it could be considered possible to beat him in the competition. Absolutely extraordinary person.
Really generous person.
Oh, extraordinary, yeah. And he really fought hard, saying, I don't want my career diarised. He didn't want Carol to write about him. But Carol did an extraordinary job. The book is absolutely extraordinary if you can get a copy of it.
Oh,
so Amy's just written in to say that Fred's son, a mathematician at the ANU, might actually know where that award is.
Well, thank you, Martin. I would dearly, dearly love to know whether it's in the family or in some other. I found out that the cricket award is held at the Government Museum, the Governance Museum in Canberra. So that's nice to hear that. But no, thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind everyone that we, Canberra Modern, Edwina, Rachel and Amy, who's online, are interviewing Ian Wong today. If you've just joined us, thank you. And if you'd also like to send in a question for Ian about industrial design and the connection to Canberra, we'd love to hear from you and hear your questions. We'll get there probably to questions in a little bit. We've got a few questions for Ian that we'd love to hear a little bit more about. I just want to go back to Stuart Devlin. What sort of period are we talking about? When did he design that award for?
With regard to Australian connections, he was most prolific in the period from sort of 60s through to 66 when he went to London. Another thing that people may not realise is the Wiltshire Stay Sharp knife, which is a very iconic sort of thing that people know about. The very first one of those was designed by Stuart. Because he was a silversmith, he was doing spoons and other cutlery for mass production for Wiltshire. When he finally got to London and got to the Royal College of Art and then went to Chicago, he then stayed in the UK. but you can still buy a cutlery designed by Stuart for Wiltshire in Australia, traditional cutlery. And so he was the first person asked by Wiltshire to do the scabbard for the first, and that was a very hard thing for me to find for my collection. It was probably one of the hardest things to actually locate. I desperately, desperately wanted one. And a lovely story, I've got very good friends down in Portland in Victoria, and they often accompany me to op shops when I'm down visiting them. And there one day for 99 cents in a Portland op shop is an original, and I think there's only two in existence. There's one at Mass in the Powerhouse, and I think I might have the only other one. But if anyone's got one, let us know.
Yes, great.
Thank you. You've mentioned some famous sort of Canberra designers before. Edwina mentioned some of them, and we've talked a little bit about Derek and Fred Ward Stewart, Robert Foster for the Fink Jug. Who are the other Canberra designers that you could tell us about? Because I guess not many of us really are familiar with the industrial designers that have that strong connection to Canberra. And I know you've been doing a bit of research. We'd love to hear about those.
Sure. It's been fantastic to be invited to do this today, and therefore to do a bit more research. My research to date has mostly been focused on Melbourne because that's where I'm from and that's where my speciality is. But John Seddon, Greg Foster and Andy Wong were all studying at Canberra. And the Phillips organisation every year used to go around for the best and brightest. And those three were all in the same year in Canberra, and they all got employed by Phillips and have had distinguished international careers. In the 100 objects, John's work was the stroller that won very high accolade and was the first of its first four-wheel steering buggy in its world, and that is in Iconic in Tasmania. Greg Foster was also in there, and he designed a lot of videos that people might have. A Philips video recorder, if they've still got one in their home, may have been something that he worked on. Andrew Crick from one of the Shrimmer Crick in Sydney was a graduate from Canberra. Graham McDonald worked on Victor lawnmowers. And another iconic product which we all know and is all over Canberra, all over Australia, is the PED pedestrian button. Okay, David Wood was Wood was a primary designer on that, and I think he studied in Sydney. But Adam Law, who worked for Nielsen Design for Carl Nielsen, also was a participant at that time at Nielsen Design and was a Canberra grad. And if we come now a little bit more recently, and this is new research, so my apologies to any Canberra grads or Canberra people who I'm missing out. But Dr. Robbie Napper, who's a colleague of mine at Monash University, doing extraordinary work in terms of transport and the future of transport. The bus that is the Optimus bus in Melbourne everywhere was his work. And I posted in my story the work of David Pidcock. David graduated in 2004. He's worked for ResMed, the company that are doing all the extraordinary work for us, helping with the COVID for the rest of the ventilators. He worked for them when he first graduated, designing sleep apnea equipment. Then he worked and won the Best in Category product in 2015 for the Red Dot Award, which is the top award in the world, as well as the Good Design Award, Best in Category that year for the NTR microphone. And he's now working for a medical company doing very, very interesting work, which will help with sterilising hospitals. And we need that sort of work right now, I think. So very, very distinguished people. The most recent people that I know of, and I know their work, Renee Lisson and Dan Armstrong from Formswell, a company doing a lot of great work based in Canberra. So the connections and relationships with Canberra are very strong, and I am enthusiastic and keen to continue to delve into that research. And like I did with Stuart, that first-hand, first-person voice research where we ultimately hear their story.
And you're talking about the University of Canberra, the industrial design course that they've gone through? Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's still going, which is a nice thing.
Very strong program. I mean, we are very fortunate in this country to have the depth and breadth. Queensland are doing fantastic work, QUT and others. South Australia has always had extraordinary graduates come from their programs, WA. So one of the strengths of Australian design is not just the unique single institution, but the quality across the board. Another person that I was remiss in not mentioning related to the stack hat, Brian Fitzpatrick, a very distinguished designer, taught many of these young people. Don Carson is another person that people would know. Imre Molnar, another very distinguished person who lived in Canberra and worked at Canberra and contributed to that fine institution, and then worked internationally, training designers in the automotive field all around the world. So it's been a lot of activity out of Canberra, and it's a little bit like when I got excited in 2009 when I first started my research. You're going, it's not fair. We've done some great stuff and nobody knows, you know? And so, you know, my collection and the things that I've been passionate about has been trying to elevate this work. There are certainly very rich things to be discovered about the work done in Canberra.
And why do you think many industrial designers are sort of under-recognised or not known? What is it? You know, and we haven't been celebrating our industrial designers from the past. Why have they been forgotten?
I don't think it's surprising, because I think that a lot of the sort of press is American or European based, and therefore there is a bias in terms of seeking to be part of that dialogue and discussion. So I think that's the primary thing, that traditionally design has had a European and American focus with its publication and historical work. I often cite things like Ettore Sottsass's Valentine Typewriter, which I love, but you know, it is in thousands and thousands of magazines, and it's spread more because it's able to be accessed. Someone wrote about it rather than necessarily people evaluating its point in history. And the power board is a classic one, I think, like that. Like, you know, the power board invented in Melbourne, all around the world, still used as the preferred object to charge your laptop or charge your iPhone. And the origins of it are not very well known. And next week we'll see actually Philip Slattery talking about it for the first time in a video we've done for Iconic, where he talks about the day he designed the power board. So
yeah, I just love that these are just everyday items that we're taking for granted, and you know, at a time when we want to sort of celebrate our intellectual capital as a nation, this is exactly that, really, isn't it? It is. So it's fantastic to hear all of these great stories. If you've just joined us, we're chatting with Ian Wong, who's the director of the Ian Wong collection, but also a lecturer, researcher, curator, collector, and industrial designer. And he's sharing some stories about some well-known Canberra connections in industrial design, but also sharing some stories about some that perhaps are not as well known until right now, because you heard it live here on Canberra Modern. Absolutely. So, Ian, you were just sort of hinting then at your collection, and I really did want to take an opportunity to ask you some questions about that collection, because you're sort of talking about this heritage and this really important need to understand and know, you know, what we've done here in Australia, what have gone on to be, you know, internationally known designs, things that we've grown up with in our households. And also, I guess, the fact that these designers are now a part of that legacy. So how many pieces have you got in your collection?
It grows every day, and I'll share a couple of very recent ones with you, but it's currently over 1,600. So I said on camera a year ago 1,100, but that was really a lack of just documenting everything. But now with the wonderful work, the collaboration with Design Tasmania, I've catalogued more and I've bought more. My credit card is a little bit maxed out, should we say? But no, most of the things do not cost a lot of money. They are curiosities from op shops and things. But my quest for my collection is pretty straightforward. I need to know the designer. Okay, so I need to know there is a direct connection to a qualified or a designer with reputation from Australia. Then I'm interested in significant pieces from that person. So I don't have a Lockheed Lounge from Mark Newsom, I'm sorry, in my collection. I would love to, but yeah, I don't think anybody's got a credit card that has that limit. So that's never going to happen. But I did buy recently this Qantas piece from Mark. Okay, so with his signature on it, which I thought was fun. So yeah. You know, at a couple of bucks, it was a bit better investment. Yeah. But so that's what the collection is really about. It's trying to tell the narrative, tell the story. It was commenced because of my academic study, way that I could exhibit and way that I could discuss the narrative through the object. It's also challenging when you are an academic and you want to publish and you don't have the copyright of images. So that was another motivation to begin that process. I was a collector before that, though. I was a collector of Olivetti and collector of other things. So it was in my blood a bit.
Couldn't stop.
No.
That's right.
And I'm not the only one with that affliction. I'm sure some of the people tuned in today.
I've been to your house, Ian, I know. It's a fantastic collection.
So they're not, the good industrial design is not invisible in your house, but for other people, good design is invisible. What makes something iconic? What makes a designed piece become iconic?
I think the thing that is most significant in a general sense, what makes iconic is its connection to community and connection to society. You know, like generally it has to be a sort of mass item, a mass production type item. But if I can focus, for me personally, it's associated with the designers themselves. So I judge things as being iconic on a personal level because I know that they have had an extraordinary designer associated with them. And then I look for that wonder of cultural connection, you know. And, you know, the other night with the iconic, I talked about this one, every school kid had, and we all had at school. I think that's iconic. And in a similar way, Richard Carlson did this very, very simple decor cup, you know, mum,
Yes.
you know, in our cupboard at home, you know. And I had no idea about Richard and about the whole history of that before I started my academic research. I was a designer and knew about these things. But so the iconic things for me are those things that we use every day. You know, if you've got a willow cheese grater, that iconic one, you know, and you're putting the cheese in your pizza or something, and you're using it every day, you go, oh, that's just, you know, so much a part of my life. You know, if you've helped the family cut the lawns and it, you know, pulling the cord on the Victor and swearing at it and stuff, you know, those personal things, walking up to a traffic light, and the sound, you know, that sound of the Australian push button was put in a recent international hit, you know, and that artist recognised something very unique about it that we didn't even know. But it is ours, and it is something that we should be all very, very proud of, that created by our best and brightest and enduring. You know, the button was not only significant because it actually, for able-bodied people, enabled them to cross the road. For poorly sighted people, for audio, you know, people deaf and all that, it solves all those problems. A very, very early example of universal design.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and so durable. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what are the gaps in your collection apart from the Mark Newsom?
Well, this last couple of weeks, I did get a gold phone, which was a big gap. The extraordinary work by Paul Schrammer, his signature piece. Before now, I'd been not wanting to spend the sort of money. I got a dual flush toilet, which again, people go, what did you just do? And I was doing some more Caroma stuff, so these arrived this week. You know, some more Caroma stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
In their original packaging, is that quite rare to find something like that?
That's exactly what starts to happen. You get so nutty that you not only want it, but you want it in its original box, or all those sort of things. But again, they tell narratives, you know. And I discover that there was a particular graphic designer doing the work with it, etc., etc. I still do have some gaps in the collection. And obviously the highlight now, you know, we're starting to talk about some of the work for ResMed and some of the work for Road. You know, I should have had Road and ResMed represented in Iconic. There's no question, you know. And you know, it's not going to stop. But I think things like my iSpy ID is very helpful in terms of people being able to contribute. You know, a little bit like Martin was saying before about the possibility of finding out where the trophy went. You know, I get extraordinary reactions sometimes to the things that I post, and I didn't necessarily have that association, and so therefore that adds to my interest and adds to my, like this one, you know, was given to me by a dear friend who I've known for many, many years, and she desperately wanted me to say how much it meant to her mother-in-law who passed recently, you know, and it was a very, very strong connection for her about, and it's got the original label on it, you know. For me personally, it's a wonderful thing, but it had an extraordinary connection in their family. So I you know, I remain passionate and I get enthusiasm from what's around me. So it's good.
So Before we kind of move on to some questions, we've had a few come through. One of the things, Ian, is that you're very generous about sharing your collection with others, as you say, through your Instagram account. Canberra Modern was lucky enough to see the 100 objects at the Robin Boyd Walsh Street house. But tell us a little bit about Iconic. How did that exhibition come about?
The very first, well, it came about largely because I have a collection, so I've been building that collection. But Design Week in 2019 was happening. I work in China a lot, some people may know, and my head of department, Jean Borden, actually encouraged me to do that exhibition at Monash as part of Design Week in 2019. It was then invited to South Australia, and I had a wonderful exhibition of Iconic at Sasa Gallery. But this current version was very much the initiative of Claire Beale, the director of Design Tasmania. And Claire contacted me and she said, would it be possible? And I said, of course, I'd love to collaborate. But in particular, her vision of the opportunity that COVID created of doing something online and of doing something in collaboration with the Robin Boyd Foundation where we could record the voices of Selena Clark. And like I said, this week you'll hear Philip Slattery. I got the privilege of interviewing Mary Featherston, and she was very welcoming and very much willing to share something which was a very long time ago for her. And what was extraordinary about the opportunity to spend time with Mary was how what insight she had into the process and to the time, both in her recollections of the way manufacturing was in Melbourne at the time, her relationships with the manufacturers that she worked with Grant, and her professionalism. She's talking about, if any of you have used those old Rotring pens sitting on a drawing board trying to draw a technical drawing of a product, which Mary had to do,
Yes.
and architects and all those people have to sit on a piece of tracing paper, the pens at times would be terrible. They'd bleed everywhere and you have to clean them. And so it was just a wonderful engagement with Mary, not around her statesman-like sort of discussion about where design could go, which she does so extraordinarily well, but for her to articulate those challenges of being a designer, sitting at the drawing board, actually making new product and being creative in her partnership with Grant. So I am very fortunate, and I'm very fortunate that Mary has shared her own voice of those times.
Some people are just joining us now, so you might have missed some of the conversation, but we will be, we have recorded this session and we'll be putting that in our channels. Are there any other questions that are coming through?
So we've had a few comments about Dream Farm homewares. Is that something that you know about, Ian?
I think that might be a take on notice on that one. So Dream Farm, is it clear whether that's contemporary or is it historical? Not clear?
It's not clear from the question.
Okay, well so no, a researcher like me loves to discover, so it's new homework. I'll write that down.
Okay, good. My nephew has found his thing. He's moved down to Canberra from Sydney, and he's studying at UC doing industrial design, and it's really pleasing to see him doing so well in something where he tried landscape architecture, he tried other things, and it's I can see that enthusiasm and passion come through his work. So he's distinctions, high distinctions in everything, and we've never seen that before. So I think that your enthusiasm speaks volumes, and I hope he's watching today. But where does a new starter in, once he's finished his degree, what will he find out there as an industrial designer? What will he do? How does he go about getting a job that's going to be satisfying?
I think it's very challenging. I'm a parent too, and I think it is very challenging for us to contemplate what are the futures for our children. But I'm also an educator, and my students in China have a different trajectory, more than perhaps people in Melbourne or Canberra or Sydney. But I think the thing that I would point to is an example like Charles Nunn, who is the director of Orbit Key. I taught Charles at RMIT, and I still remember he did do very well at university, got a very good job. So that won't happen to every graduate, that he was obviously a very good student, but he took the idea of Orbit Key as something that he thought he could do. Kickstarter and all those things were just starting to come about. And I still remember he came to me the night before it was launched. He said, "Ian, how do you think I'll go? I want about $8,000. and he got the $8,000 in hours, or he corrected me the other day when I had mentioned, he said it wasn't 2 hours in, it was a bit longer, but within the day he'd achieved that goal that he set. And now he's one of the biggest employers of designers in Melbourne. He's got a very successful global business. So I think, this forum, which we weren't doing ourselves a little while ago, demonstrates how things change very rapidly for this generation. And it's about, the tyranny of distance is definitely not a problem anymore. So, even Canberra to Sydney used to be an issue, right? But it's not an issue anymore, So wherever they want to pursue their creativity, however they want to pursue their creativity, there is an opportunity, I'm sure.
We've had a few comments about Dream Farm. So apparently they're sort of homewares, innovative homewares, looking at a garlic crusher. But then there's one comment that says that they use an American tablespoon measure. So that is a bit of a trap, isn't it, when we're using different products and recipes and, why that has to happen, I don't know. But anyway, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. And sadly, due to COVID, the project that you and Canberra Modern were going to work on didn't come up, but here is an opportunity that we never thought we would have a chance to speak to you instead. So for those, watching, we had planned to bring part of Ian's collection through the 100 objects called Objects Design in the Home, and to mount it on display in the Robin Boyd's Manning Clark house, which is very much aligned with those objects in their household contexts, and would have been a fabulous partnership between Ian's collection, that fabulous mid-century house museum, and Canberra Modern. So fingers crossed we can work together again next year. That's right. But I would highly recommend everyone look up the iconic exhibition at Design Tasmania, because it really is a fabulous exhibition, and well done to that team who, as you said, had to realise something when we were all changing and pivoting and going to online. But it's been, a joy for us, a real opportunity for us who can't actually travel there, and lots of value add in terms of those videos, Ian, that you've been responsible for. So thank you so much for joining us. It really has been a fantastic week. I've learnt so much just about Canberra industrial design, but industrial design as well. And we thank you for your generosity in sharing your collection and your knowledge with us.
No, an absolute pleasure, guys. And I look forward to doing something in the future. And there's plenty of opportunities, like we said.
Yes. Yeah,
thanks so much.
Right. And for those of you who've missed our conversation, it is recorded and it'll go up on the Canberra Modern website. So thanks
you
for joining in,
Have
everyone.
a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Ian.